Tuesday, July 8th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Hello, green thumbs, and those of you who are green thumb curious. It is gardening day, so we've got tips, and if you want to chat about anything grow season related, we are here for you. My guest is Tim Walsh, nursery manager, Munn Botanical Garden. That sounded really supportive of me. We're here for you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good. I will say, folks, gardening day, the way it always works, but just in case you're a new listener thinking, I'd like to know about gardening, or I'd like to talk about gardening, or anything around the grow season, anything grow related for this grow season we are in for the summer of 2025, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Texts 709-327-8206. And before I skip ahead, do you want to talk about the sheet of paper?
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Because if not, I forget it.
Yeah, I know. We get caught up in the calls, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we don't have time at the end, yeah. Yeah, so I brought in a few, just a few notes to talk about what's happening at my work at the Botanical Garden. What a year it's been, Adam, at the garden. So far, it's been a fantastic season. We were talking a little bit about it before we started here, just how early it's been for a lot of things and how gardeners have been reliably able to depend on the weather staying warm for those early transplants and getting things out of the greenhouse and hardening things off. It's been a really successful year. And you really see it in the development of the plants. And so the garden plants have started to grow and started to flourish. Things are in bloom earlier than they would normally be. We're seeing it in the vegetable gardens, which are starting to come alive a lot faster, and things are developing real nice. So our biggest challenge at the garden is just trying to keep the rabbits out of the vegetable patch. So
they are,
yeah, but everything eats, So I understand that too. But we actually literally had to put up a chicken wire fence around our vegetable patch.
Yeah, because asking them to stay away just didn't
No,
work.
we talk to them all the time and give them all kinds of encouraging words on how to stay away. But
I heard Todd uses really encouraging words.
Yeah, there's a few threats of ending up in the oven, but they still come back. But they're back in the dead of night, of course, when no one's around. So
yeah, ninja rabbits.
But in July's a busy time. So Todd is actually doing a workshop on pests and diseases on the 15th.
Great.
So if you've had challenges, of course, or if you think you're going to, it'll be a great workshop. And it's actually timed for July 15th because then Todd can actually collect examples from the garden and actually show physical examples about what things look like when they're being affected by insects and diseases, because it is inevitable that some plants are going to get them. And some plants almost reliably get they're affected by the same insect or disease year after year. So it's really nice when you can actually not only see photos from a PowerPoint display, but actually have some examples to see that. And then on the 18th, we do this booze and botany series throughout the summer. And it is what it is. It's you actually come in and you are served an alcoholic drink if you want one from the cafe at the garden, and the alcohol will even have themes. So sometimes it's white wine this time. Obviously, wine comes from a plant, obviously grapes, and we have a grapevine down in our garden. But sometimes there's like beer walks and there's cocktail walks and that sort of thing. And there always is a plant focus on the flavors that go into those drinks.
So did you hear about one of the popular drinks of this summer? Speaking of white wine and botany, it's Sauvignon Blanc with sliced, frozen jalapeno pepper.
No way.
Yeah. It is. And so I will tell you this now, and your phone's probably listening. You will. I guarantee in the next couple of days, you're going to see that somewhere on social media.
Yeah. I believe that, actually.
And the taste is, it's enjoyable.
It's actually, you know what? It's so funny you say that, because I was at a friend's house on the weekend for dinner, and I was served a mocktail. It was a mojito. Yeah. And it had a slice of jalapeno pepper.
There you go.
Isn't that funny?
Oh, it's moving.
And I had forgotten about that till this moment. But it did impart this really interesting flavor. And it wasn't like super overpoweringly hot, but it was the
Not
flavor
at
of the
all.
pepper was there. It was delicious.
Yeah, there's no, like, if anyone's scared of spice, this do not
Yeah.
be in this case,
No,
because
not
whether
at
it's a
all.
mocktail or
Yeah.
if you're doing Sauvignon Blanc or whatever, it just gives this really interesting extra something to it that is such a nice summer curiosity as you look at your raised bed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was real nice. And then Nature Tots is back every Friday morning. So if you have a young tot, preschoolers, and you want to come in and learn a little bit about nature, our team will take you down to the pond, and you'll see some ducks down there and sing some songs, maybe read a little bit of book and things like that. So it's really a lot of fun. And then, of course, one of the big things that we announced just last week, which is really exciting, is that we now have kayaks at Oxen Pond for rental. And so you can actually come and rent a kayak and go out and spend an hour on Oxen Pond. You'll get safety instruction. You'll get a life jacket. You'll get all you need to do and what not to do when you're out there. And those are available on the weekends and also on Thursday evenings, because on Thursdays throughout the summer, we also do what are called Twilight Thursdays, and the garden stays open until 8 p.m. on Thursday evenings. And it's a really nice time in the garden, the evening. There's something about being in a garden. I know myself, I like to be in my own garden in the evening and not necessarily working in it, but just being in it. You know, it's that quiet time. It's that when things are generally kind of settled down for the day, and you can just kind of stroll around and just enjoy the environment, the space you're in, the fresh air. It's usually not as windy at night. And the lighting is beautiful. So
that summer sun, as it's kind of moving towards the setting in summertime with the heat and just the look that it gives everything.
Fantastic.
It's quite. I enjoy being out, whether it's garden, nature, somewhere, and just soaking it in.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But you can come and appreciate that in a kayak at Oxen Pond.
That's really neat.
So,
that's a great addition.
Yeah.
All right, so folks, kayaking at the Memorial University Botanical Garden, Nature Tots on Fridays, July 18th, Booze and Botany, white wine, July 15th, workshop with Todd Boland, Pests and Diseases. Google the Botanical Garden if you want.
It's all there. It's all on our website and Facebook site, yeah.
We've got George Williams is on the line from Gander. Hi, George. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking my call, Adam.
Thanks for calling as always. Happy summer to you.
Thank you, and you as well. On a little side note, dear, I'm still waiting for Ramona Deering to be on as a guest, because I'm sure by now she is an expert gardener.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sure Ramona's right into the thick of it for gardening season. I am sure. And would be, I think if you sit in the chair here for this show for any amount of time, you just kind of start to get into it. And then at some point, like with Ramona, you become an expert yourself.
Yeah, I kind of miss her. She was just, like an icon of the gardening show.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
And George, just what Adam was just talking about there, just before the show, he was showing me pictures of his own vegetable garden. So I think some of what's happening here on Tuesdays is starting to rub off on Adam as well.
Yeah, it's a real gateway drug to gardening. This Tuesdays on the Signal, I'll tell you.
It's addictive,
There's worse things to be addicted to.
That's true.
Absolutely. Tim, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
First of all, I'd like to know if you can give us a brief review of the difference between a hybrid and a cultivar.
Well, there's not a lot of difference between the two. Cultivars generally tend to happen in nature kind of almost accidentally, where hybrids are very intentional. So the hybrid is when a botanist, a horticulturist, a grower intentionally takes two varieties of plants and artificially fertilizes them. So they will take pollen from one plant and give it to the receptive organs of a plant that is that will actually work, that will actually sort of blend. It has to be very specific. It's not, you can't blend, for instance, a potato with an apple. It has to be related. Yeah, it has to be within the same family. And then that apple, that resulting seeds, then whether you're breeding, let's say it's potatoes, because that's how potato breeding is done, then that potato flower that's been pollinated is isolated so that nothing else interferes with that. And then that allows that plant to to develop a seed capsule, and then the seeds are collected and grown and then studied to see if there's any difference in genetic material, if there's any difference in habit, if there's any difference in how that plant grows, produces, for instance. And so that's the hybrid. And the cultivar is often a name that's interchangeable, and they're kind of very similar. But the cultivar sometimes is just a slight variation within the two plants that happens naturally. So it's not something that's done intentionally. So you'll see that sometimes in plants where you might have plants that have a very slight differences between the two parents, but it's not something that was actually created by a human.
Thank you. I'd like to know if I've wanted to do some layering on a rhododendron, and I'd like to know how difficult you think it is, and what's the procedure. Now, this is layering when you pin it to the branch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's actually a great form of propagation. And for the folks listening, it's actually when you take a branch of a tree, usually, and you bend that down without damaging it. And it usually is a plant that already has some branches that are already pretty close to the ground. So some lower branches that are growing out from the shrub in a more horizontal way. And you can actually, some plants have that ability to do that naturally, just from the weight of the branch actually weighs the branch down onto the ground. And then all of a sudden it takes root. So you can actually force that into some plants, like rhododendrons, a lot of like Wigilias, spireas, all those garden flowering plants. And what you do is you just pin it down and weigh it down, and you can simply even lay down a branch and put a weight on it, like a brick or something like that, and make sure that there's soil around that contact area. And if everything goes right, which it should, that stem will actually start to produce its own roots, and the root stem will go down into the soil. And then you can test that every now and again, do a little tug test to see if it's rooted. With a rhododendron, however, it's going to take a while. It's not something that happens within one season. It can take a couple of seasons for that to happen. Rhododendrons are slow to produce roots generally. And then once you know that you've got that rooting happening, and you can actually pull back some of the soil to look for those roots. And when you see it, then you can snip off the branch between the roots and the tree, of course, dig up the freshly rooted plant, and then move it to a new site, and you've got a new plant.
When you do it, do you sort of scrape off a little bit of the bark?
Yes, sometimes that can actually speed it up, yeah. So you scrape off, not a lot, but all you want to do is expose, and usually it's done on the lower part of the branch where it's going to be most exposed to the soil. So you just scrape off a little bit of that soil, and that scarring will sometimes encourage, well, what it does is encourages root hormones that are naturally within the tree or the shrub to be localized to repair that plant. But in this case, those hormones will actually go towards stimulating root development.
And I'm wondering, do you do this with the new growth or old growth?
Well, my experience with propagation from any shrub and tree generally, for the most part, is that new growth is best. When we do rhododendron cuttings at the Botanical Garden, we take a lot of top cuttings from the Botanical Garden, and we do rhododendrons, Wigilias, spireas, like I just said, lilacs, deutzias, all these wonderful flowering shrubs. We actually take midsummer growth, and actually we'll be starting to do that pretty soon. If not this week, maybe next. We'll be going out looking for about 6 inches of brand new growth at the tips of the branches. That's generally where you get the best rooting happening. And so there are some plants, like some of the evergreens, that do a little bit better when you take what are called hardwood cuttings. And when that's sometimes also a little bit of a confusing term too, hardwood and softwood, because trees and woody plants are definitely organized in terms of their wood type, whether it's hardwood or softwood. But in this particular case, we're referring to literally the density of the growth, and so all plants produce softwood growth, but eventually over the season, the woody material becomes harder, and then you're getting into the hardwood growth. And that happens even on hardwood plants, like birches, for instance, which are hardwood. A birch will produce softwood shoots that are happening right now, but eventually it will become hardwood like the rest of the tree. So, if anybody out there is interested in doing any propagation when it comes to like trees and shrubs, just do a quick little research in terms of when is the best time to take that cutting, because you can do all the right things, but if you're not doing it at the right time, you may not get very good success. Our experience for the most part is that a lot of them do best with softwood cuttings midsummer.
Now, if you're taking softwood cuttings off a rhododendron, what would you do? Just dip it in a little bit of rooting
hormone? Yes, absolutely, yeah. And also, try not to take. We don't take very big. We're not taking a full branch or anything. We're really just taking that 5 or 6 inch long stem at the tip of the branches that we're seeing now. And I will also say that our experience is that we have the best results in our setup with the small leaf rhododendrons, as opposed to
like
the
PJM.
and smaller even. There's a lot of variety in that particular species, and some of the very large plants that have very big shiny leaves, the big Catabiense types, those big standards that you see on front lawns, they will do from cuttings. But it's just that because they're big plants, you can't do very many of them before they start to take up a lot of room. And the other thing about rhododendrons is that they can take upwards of about 6 months to produce roots. So you have to think about how you're going to do that going forward. 6 months from now, we're into Christmas and it's cold. And so in our particular case, of course, we have a heated greenhouse. Then we will hang on to those cuttings. And now I'm potting those up in the greenhouse after they've rooted, in January and February. Outdoors, you may want to get at that sooner rather than later. And not to say that you need full 6 months. You could actually get rooting beforehand. And then you'd want those plants then to slowly go naturally dormant and follow the seasons outside. So for that sort of propagation and for that particular setup, you want to get at that sooner rather than later.
That's great information, Tim. Finally, I'd like to know, for tomatoes, to help prevent the blossom end rot, can you just give them regular fertilizer now? And when is the critical time for adding, say, for calcium and magnesium?
Yeah.
Is it when the tomatoes develop, or is it right from the start?
Right from the start, actually, yeah. So the plants will need that soil, that specific soil. So making sure that you have soil that's been balanced, pH balanced. Calcium in the soil can often be obtained from limestone, for instance. That's really helpful there. So if you make your own mix at home, just make sure that you also add some lime to that soil in the springtime, because the plant is developing right from the start. Right from the seedling, it's starting to develop. It's starting to look into the soil for those nutrients that they need, and if they don't get it, especially when the fruit is happening, then they're going to immediately show a negative response as a result of that. So the sooner the better, for sure.
All great information.
Yeah.
I thank you so kindly, Tim, and happy gardening, everyone.
Thank you. Same
Thanks,
to you,
George. Take care.
Thank you.
George Williams there on the line from Gander. So, folks, if you want to join the discussion, asking for tips or to talk about your grow season so far, my guest, I'm Adam Walsh. No relation here with Tim Walsh, the nursery manager of Mum Botanical Garden. The numbers to call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Text us, 709-327-8206, the signal at cbc.ca. Speaking of emails, what's that saying? Fences make good neighbors, or
That's
something
right.
like that. So here, speaking of which, email from Fred.
Right.
Had a neighbor take down a fence and will not replace it. Can you suggest a small bush that I can put up in its place as a barrier that does not take over my garden?
Oh, it's a good question, actually. And fences make good neighbors. I think that's a poem, isn't it? By
someone.
One of the American poets, I think.
Imagine that. Anyways.
Yeah. Yes, there's a few options, certainly. Probably one of the most reliable hedgings is privet. And I like privet because it develops very quickly. It's not a showy plant. It doesn't produce, and most hedges are not grown for their floral aesthetic because they're pruned. And oftentimes they may have the ability to flower, certainly like privet does. It does eventually produce a little white flower. That's pretty cute, but it's not a huge big show like a lot of other shrubs that we grow. But it takes incredibly well to pruning, and so you can prune it quite small and keep it just a few feet tall, and you can prune it right up to quite a large height. And a friend of mine just recently contacted me because he has had somebody pruning his hedge for quite a few years, and that person's now retired, and he's looking for somebody to prune his privet hedge. And the person who came to prune his hedge would set up scaffolding to prune this hedge, and it's in a beautiful example of how one plant. And I grow up privet at my house, just a few doors away, and I keep it to about 5 feet. And yet he likes the privacy that you get from this, 10, 12-foot high privet. Incredibly hardy, very strong in the winter as well, can stand up to lots of wind and snow and ice and everything. So privet is great. But then there's lots of other hedging material too. I saw a beautiful hedge just recently made from Wiggilia, actually, which is a flowering plant.
Yeah.
But it was also pruned as well. So it was pruned to keep small, but then you do get those beautiful flowers that happen as well. And it's surprisingly, a lot of plants can be pruned, and yet we're sometimes just a little bit afraid to prune because we think we might be doing it harm. I have a holly in my backyard that I prune yearly with a hedge pruner. And I'll go out there and I'll just round it over. And it's probably about anywhere from 5 to 6 feet high. And I love that rounded look. And this is the male holly, which doesn't produce any fruit. So I'm not destroying any of the potential lovely red berries that you usually get at Christmas time. And so that could easily be made into a hedge.
When do you do that pruning?
I do that. I'll be doing that pretty soon, actually, because right now it's putting out some new growth.
New growth, right?
So I'll wait for that new growth to finish, and then I'll do a quick prune. And then the next growth that will come will be below that cut. So when you prune something, it actually encourages branching below the cut. So that's why you end up with a nice dense growth habit. And that's the principles of pruning generally when it comes to hedging. There's a Peking cotoneaster as well, which is real nice. It's not grown for its flowers, but what's nice about this is it's got really nice glossy leaves, beautiful fall color, just this beautiful array of reds and yellows in the foliage. That's a nice hedge material too. So lots of choices.
We've got Megan Holland on the line. Hi, Megan. How you doing?
Good, Adam. How are you?
Good.
I wanted to ask some questions today about Wiggilia. It seems to be the hot topic. I think I've heard it now 2 or 3 different ones.
All right, that's good. Yeah.
But Tim, I'm wondering, I have a Wiggilia that I planted 5 or more years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Most often, I'm not sure if it's dead. I don't know any tips for promoting growth, or it's barely giving any flowers.
Okay.
And I'm just not sure if I have it planted in a good spot or...
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So it's a very popular plant here, and if you drive around the St. John's area, and I'm sure all across the island right now, you will see these plants in full bloom. It's their season right now, and they range in color from light pink to a very dark, almost red, and white as well, even. Beautiful plants, and so generally they need the basics. Really, they need decent garden soil. So as long as you planted it in soil that you feel it's half decent, and it's not just bare gravel. If they're growing in decent garden soil, they'll do fine. And it does need a little bit of room because it wants to kind of grow in a kind of a rounded shape. So it'll be as tall as it is wide in time, and then just, generally it is one of those plants that kind of, for us and for most gardeners, just will do their thing each year without a huge amount of excess fertilizer and that sort of thing. It's always a good idea to top dress our shrubs annually with a little bit of compost or something like that. And if you don't have that, you could even just sprinkle some 6-12-12 fertilizer over the surface of the soil, and that will dissolve and make its way down to the root system. Or if you don't have that, even water-soluble fertilizer, which is just a very easy powder that you'd get and put into your watering can and just water at the base of the plant, and it would get absorbed into the soil and then eventually taken up by the roots. So tell me a little bit about what you're experiencing there. It sounds like yours is not growing as well as you'd like it to.
Yeah, so we have it planted in the middle of our lawn. It's in a little bit of a dip in the lawn, so we planted it specifically in the middle of a dip so that it would sort of be a reminder to people, like the ground is going to drop here.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I'm not sure if that is an issue. Of course, like in certain places in the lawn, there's some moss. I'm not sure.
That's not a
Maybe
problem.
when you say tall as wide, it makes me wonder if we've cleared enough of the lawn around it. Maybe could the lawn be choking it out by chance?
No, not at all. No.
Okay.
No, the lawn wouldn't. The lawn doesn't have deep enough roots to cause that problem. The dip in your lawn, does it collect water, like excess water? Do you know? Because that could be a problem if every time it rains, the water is kind of pouring into that dip and it just hangs on there for a long time, and the plant, the roots could be struggling in like overly wet soil for a long period of time.
That is a good question. I haven't noticed that, but again, like if there's moss and stuff, I'm not sure if that would also be connected to water and be a sign of water. I'm not sure.
Sometimes moss is a sign of poor drainage in soil. It's also a sign of acidic soils too, because moss like it to be acidic in order to grow. So lawns generally like to be a bit more well drained. So folks who do the best job at growing a nice green lawn, they'll have their lawn aerated from time to time, and that's a mechanical tool that you get that takes little plugs off of the out of the soil, and it basically opens up the sod so that air and moisture can get down into the soil a little bit easier. And then also they would lime the soil on an annual basis, and the liming actually helps to reduce the acidity in the soil. And so that will, and grass does better when the soil is less acidic or more alkaline. But I've seen Wigilias grow in all kinds of different scenarios, and I've seen them grown in areas where they never get lime, and they still do okay. So I don't think that's your problem. I just wonder about that dip, and I wonder about the soil too that it's in, and if the soil was, because sometimes front lawns, if you're in an urban area, front lawns are created when the foundation of the house is dug out, and that lawn then is basically a pile of rubble and gravel, subsoil, and unless the original owners replace that, or when the Wigilia was being planted, that a nice big pocket of soil was taken out and that gravel was taken out and some real nice organic soil put back there. Sometimes the plant can be struggling as a result of that. So it's difficult for me to say for sure, but the only thing to do is try and improve the conditions. So just maybe have a look at the soil next time it rains and see if the water's pooling in that hole. If it is, then sometimes you can simply just get a garden fork and go around the plant and push it into the ground, like push it right down as far as you can get it. And you're basically aerating that area, and you're creating drainage holes as well for that excess moisture to get down through. And then you can top dress around the branching, the sort of outer branches. So ideally, you could actually take up the sod around the base of the plant and expose all that soil. And then anytime you water, anytime it rains, or any kind of fertilizer or whatever you put on there, is going to be immediately available to the root zone underneath. I would suggest giving it some fertilizer. Some of that 6-12-12 or something that's got at least more phosphorus, which is that middle number, than it does have nitrogen, which is that first number. Because you want phosphorus is great for establishing root development, which is going to benefit in good top growth, but it also is great for flower production. And so in this particular case, you want both, but you certainly want those flowers. And so look for that. And you can go to a garden center and just tell them that's what you're looking for. And they have different fertilizer formulations for various different things. If you're growing vegetables, you might want a different fertilizer than if you're growing a Wiggilia, for instance. And they'll be able to give you the one that works well for what you're struggling with there.
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. And I'm so glad that Gay Seeds is in my neighborhood, so I can just pop by on my way home.
There you go. Yeah, you'll get what you need there for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tim and Adam. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Megan. Happy summer.
You too.
All right. I'm going to spin my computer monitor around for you, Tim. Here's something from Jody Boyd in Gander. with the pick, which is why I'm twisting around my monitor.
All right.
Something is feasting on the leaves of my broccoli plants. I have been looking for the culprit, but have not been able to identify it either before or after dark. So Jody's out all the time. And in this picture, these are some sad-looking leaves.
Oh, no. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, yeah, that looks...
so for the radio audience, imagine if I was a kindergartner who was trying to cut up one of those sheets of paper for like a snowflake, but I'm not very good at it, and that snowflake's actually a leaf in terms of holes, because that's what it is. A holy leaf.
Yeah, it looks like a little bit like Swiss cheese, really.
Yeah, it's been shredded.
It's been shredded, yeah. It's too bad, and that's frustrating and disappointing as well. A little bit sad, but it's not uncommon. And so there's a couple of things that's likely doing that. One is slugs and snails, and they do feed at night. Now it sounds like they're out at night having a check, but it doesn't mean that they're still not coming there later at night. And they can come in there, this one big slug, or even just one or a couple of snails, those hard shell snails, or even the ones that don't have a shell. They're all out there. Everything eats. They're all trying to trying to survive like the rest of us, and they're potentially coming up and feeding on those leaves.
Slow but stealthy.
Yeah, and then as the sun rises or the daylight comes, they just crawl back down and go off and hide for the rest of the day, or go in the shade. So it could be that. And of course, the other thing that is a plague for any cabbage family plant is the cabbage moth, or cabbage butterfly. Sorry, it's not. I keep calling it a moth, but it's actually a butterfly. And it's that white butterfly that flits around the garden during the summertime. And it's beautiful butterfly, but it lays its eggs on cabbage plants and cabbage varieties, cabbage, turnips, Brussels sprouts, all those plants, broccoli, cauliflower. They're all subject to prey from this insect. And it looks like it's just flitting around, but it very quickly touches down and turns its abdomen around and deposits a leaf underneath the outer edge of the leaves. Very quickly, little tiny egg is there. It'll stay there for a few days until it hatches into a caterpillar. And that caterpillar immediately starts to feed on the plant. And it even takes the color of the plant after a while, I guess, because it just feeds so much, and that helps with its camouflage. And I looked really close there when Adam turned his screen around to see if I could see one. And I couldn't, but that doesn't mean they're not there or on the underside. But there's you're seeing one there?
Yeah, just move on in. I'll keep talking as you look. Like, I don't know, is that something up there? The little green little thingies, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can see them.
Breaking news, right? Here we go. There's a couple of them, eh? Yeah. Well, doctor.
Yeah. So there is two. We just
I tell you, these pictures.
These pictures are great.
The world we live in.
Yeah. So I can see on the leaf there's actually two caterpillars on there, and it's clever how well they disguise themselves. And because they're eating just that plant, and their body takes on that color. And again, that's nature's way of survival, right? So the camouflage is one of the ways that insects survive. And so that insect is feeding on your plant. And you can simply go out at night or go out any time, because they continue to feed throughout the day. They're not so nocturnal like the slugs and snails, and just pinch them and kill them, throw them away.
Yeah, the squish method.
The squish method. That's easy when you've got a small number of plants. The challenge becomes when you've got a larger number of plants, and you just can't keep up with it. And so there's a couple of things you can do there. One is a product called BTK, Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a type of bacteria. It's a natural insecticide, so it's very safe to use. And you simply just spray it on there. And immediately when those insects take their next feed, their stomach gets infected by this bacteria, and they're not able to feed, and they just dehydrate and dry and die. It's very effective. We recommend it all the time. The other thing to do is what is generally done before this period, and that is to actually cover your plants with either a very fine mesh, like a nylon mesh, or what's called row cover, which is very commonly used. It looks like a white blanket, and you often see those probably out in vegetable gardens. but it's a spun polyester fabric, and what it does is that it basically is a physical barrier that disallows the insects to reach your plants, and enough light passes through it so that the plants can still grow underneath. And so it's a really great non-chemical way of controlling these insects. So I would say, go out there, pinch off what you see, get rid of them. And if you only have a small number, you may just be able to continue to do that. But after that, if you're not around all the time, and it won't take long before there's another egg laid, because those butterflies are around all the time, then keep a close eye on it. Otherwise, get the BTK and or the row cover, and hopefully those plants will recover. There's still a long season yet, and cabbages will grow right into October here, so it should be okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
A couple more texts in. Hi, Adam. Super program. Thank you. Pruning apple trees. Would like a good video. How much can you prune an apple tree? Also, can you layer a beauty bush? Thanks. That's Don from Salmon Cove.
Okay, yeah. So the beauty bush, yes, absolutely layering, just like we talked earlier with George out in Gander. And if they didn't hear that portion, it's simply a matter of pinning down a branch onto the ground, usually one of the lower branches, and holding it down there with a weight or with some sort of, usually a weight, like even just simply a rock or a piece of brick or something. And after it roots, then disconnect it from the main plant, dig it up and move it to another place. By the way, that digging up portion of that method is usually done after the plant is dormant. So you don't want to do that in the middle of summer, for instance, because it's too hot and it'll be too much of a stress on the plant. So if it does root, either do it in the fall or leave it there till the spring and then do it then, and the plant will survive, have a much better chance of survival. Pruning apples, it's a bit of an art form. Apples generally grow fairly quickly unless they are pruned, and in fact, apples need to be pruned generally. We sometimes see, crabapple trees around, and they're quite large plants, and they're beautiful when they're big. But it also makes a lot of that fruit inaccessible because it's so tall. And so apple orchards, if you've ever seen an actual real orchard, the trees are actually kept quite small because then the fruit are easily harvested. And so generally with pruning in any plant, but especially apple trees, and the pruning rule is generally first to cut away anything that's diseased, dying, or dead. And that's the principle for any tree, any plant, whether it's a fruit tree or a display plant. Those parts of the dead leaves, dead branches, diseased stems, those need to go, no matter what it is. So get rid of those first. And then when it comes to apples, think about the shape of the plant and what you're looking for. Quite often when you prune apples, or if it's gotten any kind of damage, what it does is it grows what's called a water shoot. And it's a very straight up, very vertical stem that shoots straight up through everything. And it's the plant's response to the injury. And so that's got to go, because otherwise it's just going to take up all that top growth and energy. So anything that's grown completely straight up, get rid of that. And then also any branches that are crossing over each other. And I don't mean, if they're crossing over each other visually, but if they're actually touching each other. And what'll happen is in the wind, they'll rub together, and it causes open wounds, and then all of a sudden you've got another diseased or infected branch. So one of those branches should go. And generally at that point, you're starting to think about the overall shape of the plant. So which of those branches will I cut away that will make the best aesthetic for the overall tree? And then think about air circulation. And I know that it's not really something we think about here because we get so much wind, and you think, well, the wind is going to get air in everywhere anyways. But just think more about the apple tree being an open growth plant in terms of air being easily able to move between the branches. And generally a bit more horizontal. So encourage horizontal growth as opposed to vertical growth. And that way you'll, in time, end up with a nice low plant that has lots of lower branches. When you get rid of all those diseased branches and all those excess stems that are taking away all these nutrients from the plant in general, then in the future those nutrients will go into producing a strong flowering plant. and flowers is where we get the fruit. So in the end, and it won't be this year because the flowering is already finished this year, but next year then that plant will put all of its positive energy into this nice structure, new growth, and you'll have this potentially a much better harvest next year.
Here's a note from Elliston, from Michael. Hello, I'm fairly new to gardening in Newfoundland. I had something happen the last few weeks that has me puzzled. I had some peas growing outside that were 1.5 to 2 feet tall, and it was as if someone came along with a pair of scissors and just cut them about 5 inches from the base. I didn't notice what looked like chewing on any of the plants. I'm not in an area where we typically have any rabbits. What would have caused this?
Wow. Well, that is a bit of a mystery.
Maybe he needs one of those neighbor bushes to
yes, that's
keep
right.
other folks out.
Yeah. Usually, Michael, when we do see damage like from foraging animals, then it is pretty obvious. You can have. We lost, for instance, just last night, we lost a tray or a couple of trays, I think, of pine tree seedlings. They were just little tiny things. They were just a few inches, and we've got a tree nursery at the Botanical Garden now as part of Canada's 2 billion tree initiative. And so we've got a sort of a side project at the Botanical Garden at the nursery where we're actually growing a lot of trees. And last time I was in with Josh Elick, who's my assistant now, and Josh is kind of heading that tree nursery. So Josh lost some trees last night from a rabbit. And the rabbit just came, and all of a sudden they were gone. And we knew it was a rabbit because we also have this wonderful student who's been with me for a few years now. Her name is Victoria McGraw. And Victoria is a biology student, just graduated and going on to do her master's. And Victoria recognized the slanted pattern of the teeth marks on the remaining stem of the pine tree and identified it as a rabbit foraging. And so that's certainly something that Michael could probably look for, because the rabbit certainly could chew off a portion of the peas. But if the peas are growing up onto something like a trellis, then it's really just eating what it can reach. And if it ate the stem and the rest of the plant still hung up there, then it just couldn't reach the rest of it. That's the only thing I can think that would be something to do that, because obviously there are lots of other larger herbivores out there like moose and things like that. But if a moose is in your garden, you're absolutely going to know it.
Kind of know.
Yeah, and then smaller things like slugs and snails. Well, they are generally much closer to the ground. And if they're up into your plants, then they're eating the leaves and things like that. They're generally not just taking a portion of the stem. Because when the stem starts to get a bit older, like this time of the year, then the stem becomes a little inedible for things like slugs and snails, because it's then getting a little bit too woody. So it sounds like that it could have been something like a rabbit, but it's difficult to say for sure. But maybe Michael could look for that slanted growth and see if that. And we had to actually take a photo of it and enlarge it to just to look at that. So maybe a magnifying glass or something like that, just to have a look.
All right.
Yeah, and if it is that, well, really the only thing to do is to trap them somehow. We've got some live traps at the Botanical Garden that we're going to try and set up to keep them away from our trees. And then if we get one, I'm going to take the rabbit for a long drive on the other end of town and give them a new home, and away from other people's gardens too, by the way.
No, just drop it off in Mount Pearl.
Yes.
The lines light up.
Yeah. So So there's always, and again, everything eats, right? And so the challenge as gardeners is to try and prevent those animals that are also hungry like the rest of us. So Michael might want to think about somehow putting in a physical barrier to keep them out, and really that's kind of all you can do. If you're border on any kind of a natural space like the forest, like meadows and that sort of thing, as opposed to city gardens, then you're subject to, unfortunately, to some of those problems.
Walter Harding's on the line, calling from St. John's. Hi, Walter.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Not too bad. May I please say I've listened to this program for many, many years, and wonderful guests from top to bottom. And your guest today is deadly. He's wicked. So
Oh, Walter, you're making me blush.
I've learned a lot of stuff about a lot of things today, and I've never met your guest, but absolutely wonderful guest, and I appreciate you very much. I have one quick question. I have a basil plant or a basil plant inside the home, and I'm not so certain how to care for it. I have managed to bring it back to life a little tiny bit. I don't really do the Google thing very much because that doesn't work out sometimes. It's a single stalk basil plant, and when the flowers come up on the top, does that mean that I have not trimmed it enough, or have I trimmed it too much?
Okay, so you're actually getting flowers on there, Walter.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And is there many leaves below the flowers?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
There's so it's about maybe 2 feet high, and maybe 1 foot below that.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So Walter, that just tells me that the plant is doing well. All basil will go to flower as it ages, and they're. You know what? Congratulations to you, because basil is like sometimes the bane of a lot of
My
gardeners.
neighbor tell me.
Yeah, I know it is. And even myself, I've had, and I grow so many things, and there's times that I just can't get them to work for some reason. This year, however, has been a good year for me, and I've got some really beautiful basil plants now. So what'll happen is the plants will continue to grow. For instance, in my case, mine are much smaller now. They're just grown from seed. So you must have yours a good while now. Have you had it indoors all winter?
Yes, and I tell you what, this is a plant that I got from a good friend of mine whose lovely wife had passed, and she started it when she started her cancer therapy, and I'd love to keep it going, and the fragrance from this plant and the taste from this plant is wild.
Oh, yeah, I know, it's amazing. Basil is just one of those quintessential herbs that I think everybody loves. You know, it's very few people I've met that, like cilantro has got that. You either hate it or you love it, and parsley, same sort of thing. But I think everybody loves basil.
Yeah.
So it is not a long-lived plant, Walter, and that's by no fault of yours. But it's I wouldn't expect it to be one of those plants that you can keep going forever. My advice to you is to enjoy it now as much as you can. And think of your friend when you're having a nice meal with it, and appreciate it that way. When it's flowering, it means that it's starting to come to the end of its cycle, and what the plant wants to do is to produce seed, and then from those flowers, and then the seed then potentially could result from some new plants. But also the challenge is to getting the seeds to mature. It takes quite a long time. What I often encourage folks to do is actually to pinch off the flowers, and to take them off the plant altogether. And what that does is it encourages new growth. And so then you could potentially get some new branching and some new leaves going forward. But it sounds like you're doing all the right things. You've kept it growing for a long time. It's gotten to be a fairly substantial size, and it's gone into flowering. So I usually see that in my plants in the fall, that when it's coming up on harvest time, they'll and it's often triggered too by the summer heat. So it's called what's often referred to as bolting. A lot of vegetables can bolt, which sometimes happens really quickly and disappointingly for some plants, like spinach, for instance, if you've ever tried to grow that. If the spinach likes to grow in cooler weather, and once the summer heat comes, spinach will bolt very quickly, which means it shifts over from a vegetative plant to a plant that wants to produce flowers and then seed, and then it eventually dies off. So it sounds like that's what's happening to yours. So it's kind of gone through its natural cycle, and you can either do like I suggested, to cut off the flowers and try and maintain the plant for a little bit of a longer period of time. I guess one thing that you could try to do is to try and actually take a cutting and just to see if you could actually produce some roots from. If it has a side shoot, a side stem, like one of those side branches that has a couple of small leaves, just see if you can just pinch that off and even simply just stand it in a glass of water and see what happens. Sometimes you may actually get some roots forming on there. And then if you get roots, then you plant that up and you actually got a new plant that you can maybe grow for another year, and you could repeat that process for a while.
Absolutely brilliant. The circle of life goes many ways.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
Thanks,
welcome.
Walter. Cheers. All right, so we've got one more call, and then we've got some rapid-fire texts and emails to get to. So let's. We've got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Bob Fitzpatrick's on the line. Hi, Bob.
Hello. Good day, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to say, regarding the Japanese beetle that's been destroying our lilies.
Oh, yes, yes.
Now, my wife has been very diligent, more diligent than I, and she in inspecting the beetles that were on our lilies, she determined it to be the red lily beetle.
Yes, the scarlet lily beetle, it's sometimes called.
And so she squat them all. And so we dealt with that. And we had to start from scratch again this year with planting new lilies.
Right, yeah. Yeah, keep an eye on them, Bob, because that doesn't mean that you still won't get them. You know, they become more unfortunately, more common than they have been. And
will do.
It was funny in my case. I'll tell just a quick story. I post a lot of photos of plants on my Facebook site, and I posted this beautiful Turk's cap lilies. It's an amazing, beautiful, very elegant looking lily. And a good gardening friend of mine, Pat Rivers, said, "Oh, that looks great. I've been picking lily beetles off of mine for days." And sure enough, I went out and looked at mine, and they were filled with lily beetles as well. So yeah, I've been like your wife out there, kind of trying to find them. And they're tricky because the minute you touch the plant, they immediately drop off and fall to the ground. It's their defense to get away.
Yeah, quickly, if I can ask a question.
Yeah, sure.
We removed a ready-looking lilac tree last year, so there's some sprouts coming up from what was left in the root.
Yes.
And we also have a tiny, on the side of the house, a tiny little fir tree. We'd like to move both of those.
Okay.
They're in different locations. We want to move them somewhere else in the garden.
Yes.
When is the best time to do that?
Best time is spring. It's certainly the worst time is now. So if you want to save those trees, don't do it now. Sometimes people have to move things because of construction, those types of things, and they just got to do it. But if you can wait till the spring, that's the best time. Do it before things start to grow. Second best time is fall. And generally, however, evergreens do better in the spring than they do in fall. But you can move them in the fall if you really have to. But again, when you do, just follow all those good principles of getting a nice big root ball.
Sure.
Take soil and roots together. Try and hold the soil and the roots together so that you don't end up with like this bare root plant that's just got dangling roots.
Yeah.
And prepare a nice soil that's usually half to twice the size, 1 to 2 times the size of the root ball, with some good soil at the base as well, and getting good fill soil as well. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, Bob.
And you're doing a great job.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Summer.
Bye-bye.
All right, rapid fire. Let's see, as quickly as we can. I stumbled upon the African queen lily online. It looks fantastic. Huge, oversized orange petals, grows to a height of 60 inches. I noticed it's recommended to plant the bulbs in the fall. Would there be any downside to plant the bulbs like this now?
Oh, if you have them now, put them in now for sure. Yeah.
Next question. Good show as always. Just wondering, is there a solution in the chemical world or something I could do to get rid of red root or September mist? Some people call it. That's mile a minute or Japanese knotweed. No, not an easy solution. It's a big plant. Dig it up as much as you can, but it's a brute of a plant, big root system, but that will set it back. It'll come back again next year. When it comes up, dig that up too. Other than that, really the only other solution, and it's a tough one to choose, but it's your choice, and that's a herbicide. Pruning apple, the same for a very tall cultured cherry?
Cherries are a little bit more rounded. They don't necessarily need to be as horizontal as apples. But again, look for those pruning principles that we talked about earlier.
And I've got, all right, the person who emailed about ants, I'll email you after the show. And folks, we've got a reporter doing a story on gout weed, because we did get a note on that. So my talented colleague Madison Taylor will go to see you tomorrow at the Botanical Garden, right?
That's right.
So there's goutweed info to come. Look at cbc.ca/NL. That is it for us today. Happy gardening, happy season. The signal at cbc.ca if you want to get in touch. Cheers.